Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dr. Judy WTF. I'm so glad to have my regular background on screen as opposed to the Aurora Borealis, although that was very pretty too. And first of all, I think that the topic of tonight is one of the most important discussions that I'm conducting. It's so important because it's so subtle and underrated by the even the community of child protective services. And the topic tonight is acts of omission. And thank you. This was a request by one of my YouTube fans. Thank you, Don. I really appreciate it. I sure hope you call in. I've got plenty to say on this subject. And so I want to also let you know this is a call-in show. Of course, most of you know that. And that number is 323-524-2599. So what is an act of omission? Well, let's start by defining the opposite. What is an act of commission? Commission means we do something. So in the case of child abuse or any kind of abuse, really, we're doing something active. We are hitting, we are beating, we are screaming, we are sexually abusing, we are verbally spewing forth names, insults, so on. So these are active abuses. So what is an act of omission? It's just the opposite. It's when you fail to do something very, very important, like have that person's back. In just plain, simple English, be an enlightened witness to the crazy. And that's what I'm going to get into today, because there's a lot of research out there about who becomes very ill and aggressive and either explodes or implodes with these repressed feelings, and who actually, even if things don't go so well in the first few years of life, who gets to have a better outcome in part two of their lives. And I'm going to make that distinction. Thank you, Alice Miller, PhD, one of my favorite authors, and she is well quoted in my book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect. And I want to refer to that quote because it's so important. It's so pivotal in the field of understanding emotional wounds. And that simply is that a child would rather be the bad child in a good world than be the good child in a bad world. And why is that so? Because the bad world is, let's say, the family, the abusers, the omitters, the committers, except that the child is in a hostage situation. So the child cannot really do anything and call the shots and expose the lies, expose the abuses, expose the omissions and the commissions. So what do? They have to protect the bond. And by protecting the bond, this causes them to turn their feelings inward. This causes them to repress and suppress. And some of you already know the outcome of repression and suppression. It's not favorable to a human being. And when this goes on and on over years and years, then let me return to my mind map, which some of you are familiar with. It's up there. Maybe you could put it up there. That's clearer. Okay, so wounds of childhood. There are 5 wounds of childhood. Obviously, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and verbal abuse. Those are all acts of commission. Neglect is the act of omission. Smothering, I don't know, I have to think about it. Smothering could be an act of commission also, because you're trying to control your child, micromanage, and so on. The one that really pops out in terms of wounds of childhood is the neglect, whether it be emotional or physical. There are all kinds of forms of neglect. Unfortunately, sometimes I do have to call child protective services. And it's interesting. The first thing they ask me is, what happened to the child? And okay, the child was hit, and the child was this, and the child was that. And even in the case of hitting, they'll always ask something like, well, were there bruises? So my answer is sometimes no, sometimes there are no bruises. But what about the psychological bruises? And these are the most harsh ones that go um, that are hidden and not addressed. And in the case of neglect, where a parent is not keeping the child safe, feeding the child, clothing the child, giving the child the love and the attention and the nurturing and the attunement and the mirroring and all the stuff that I talk about, in those cases, there are no marks to be had. And there is no big report there. Yes, they do pay attention to neglect. I do know that this is a category that gets checked off in the files. It's just that it's really hard to prove because there are no bruises. But again, there are bruises, and these bruises are internal. So let's go back to the mind map and understand a little bit more about a system gone right versus a system gone wrong. So let's just say that there are two parents in a household, and one is the omitter and one is the committer. So let's say daddy is hitting little Johnny and he's the committer, and mommy's just standing by and allowing this to happen. So now we've got a situation where obviously the little child has a reaction to the wound. Maybe he's scared, maybe he tenses up, maybe he cries, maybe he eventually starts hitting back. But what's not happening is that the second parent is not stepping in and having that child's back. And if this doesn't happen, some very serious consequences can occur. Usually, in a more ideal situation, we have checks and balances, just like we're supposed to have checks and balances in our government. We're supposed to have psychological checks and balances. And usually it is one parent that checks the other parent. So if one is out of line, they may have a truth conversation, let's say, hopefully, with their partner, mate, husband, wife, and say, I want to talk to you about what just happened between you and little Johnny. And I'm really concerned about your style of discipline. And then the father might even minimize it by saying, well, come on, it was just a little slap, it was just a little this, it was just, but listen, it wasn't a little slap. This is really role modeling anger. And if you look carefully at what happens when you role model anger, you're going to see signs of this kind of role modeling. And as I say in my book, Be the Cause: Healing Human Disconnect. And if you don't have it, please get it. It's on my website. You can get it for free. It's a free PDF. If you want to order it from Amazon, you can do that as well. And in it, I explain the entire mind map system. And in panel 2, I talk about the father as the mitigating factor. The nurturer, who's usually the mother, is supposed to be nurtured by the father. I know in this example, I kind of reversed it, where the father was, in this particular case, the committer, and the mother was the omitter. But usually it's the father's job to pick up the slack. So if mother isn't doing her job, the father is the second chance. And this second chance prevents the child from being locked in what I refer to, I have my own little lexicon. I refer to it as the double dungeon of darkness. And this double dungeon of darkness traps the kid in a very unsafe place. And they can't turn to mom because mom doesn't have his back, cannot turn to dad because dad doesn't have his back. So checkmate. The child starts turning inward and starts blaming himself. And this is where the psycho, with the emphasis on psycho pathology, begins, because the self blame and shame does what Alice Miller presented in her theory. It creates a world where they fantasize that the parents are right and they are wrong. And this starts a really horrible process of turning the anger inward, and this creates depression. Later on, it creates other symptoms. It basically creates what I refer to as the hole in the soul. And so when this happens and no one is there as an enlightened witness to say, you know, I saw that, I understand that wasn't very, very healthy. And and the fact that you're blaming yourself right now, that's not really, really healthy either. So let's self correct on that. Do you really think it's your fault that your parents are out of control or have poor disciplinary styles or are modeling aggression or are not there for you to really attend to your feelings? And that one person who can act as have your back, I'm your enlightened witness, I'm able to bring a little bit of sanity into the situation, can set that person free. And again, this is a call-in show, everybody, 323-524-2599. And I want to read a little bit about what Alice Miller has to say, because it is so significant. And of course, I see this in my practice all the time, where one parent does something and the other parent just does nothing. And this is devastating to the child and also very confusing to the child, because now they don't have a role model of what's appropriate here. And of course, they blame themselves. So Alice Miller, in her article, The Essential Role of an Enlightened Witness in Society, one of my favorite topics. And why is it my favorite topic? Because it's so essential, and it's actually what the mind map therapy is meant to be to people suffering from narcissistic abuse and narcissism and borderline personality disorder, and which is the result of childhood abuse and neglect, and all of the psychopathologies and all of the symptoms and so on. And so it's just such an important topic. So Alice Miller says, I've always wondered why people take pleasure in humiliating others. Clearly, the fact that some people are sensitive to the suffering of others proves that the destructive urge is not as universal as maybe we thought. Um, so she says that it's only by closely examining the childhood histories of murderers, especially murders, that I can begin to comprehend the roots of good and evil. I just love her stuff. And it's so in line with my thinking. And it's so in line with the treatment plan of the Psychological Healing Center. Because now here she is addressing the wounds and the root cause of the injuries that lead to destruction. I think we have a call in, so I'll take the call in. Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Hi, this is Dr. Judy. Who's this, please?
Hi, Dr. Judy. This is Maura calling from
Hi,
Oregon.
hi, Maura. I know your voice. I've heard, we've had several conversations. How are you doing, and how do you relate to the topic of Action is the Only Remedy to Indifference by Elie Wiesel, and the topic of acts of omission?
Well, I have a question for what when the child is trapped in this family dynamic where you have, so in this scenario, imagine you've got a biological mother who's let's just say she's an abuser, in terms of she's an omitter. She doesn't do the hitting or the actual commission. She does the omission stuff by not being there, not supporting, by gaslighting and shaming, neglecting, all of those kinds of things.
Yes.
And she brings into the family dynamic multiple men who are not the biological father bails when the child's little. Okay, so then you get multiple husbands that come in, and the mother is doing this almost, it's like she gets pleasure because she never wanted the child. So the child knows from inception, that they're not wanted.
Okay.
And then they're born, and then there's a life of this where the mother seems to bring men in that will do the committing against the child for coming into her life, because the child ruined her dreams of all the success that she was going to have, and she's tied down, right? So the men come through and they commit all of the abuse while she refuses to support. And the child that's trapped in this is aware, and it drives the child crazy, because the child
exactly what happens.
Knows that they're right. So you talked about how it's better, the child would prefer to think that they're bad and the family is good. But in this scenario, imagine the child knows the family is bad, knows by age 7 what's going on, and then is trapped and can't escape. And this child goes multiple times has no independent witnesses in the family. It's a closed system that the adults want to protect what they've got going on. So to the outer world, it looks perfect. It's terrible on the inside. And the child goes to multiple sources to try and get help. These are psychologists that they're sent to, will come and be forced with an authority figure to have a conversation. And instead of the mother showing up, she sends the men in.
Okay, so okay, go ahead. Ask the question, because there's a lot of material I want to start addressing it. Yes.
Well, I'm just sort of setting up a scenario. My question is, what is there've got to be young people and children that are trapped in these kinds of families that listen to you. What is a child to do when they've tried everything they can? Because it turns the child to hate, and drives the child crazy and drives them into a cluster B personality disorder. Essentially, that's a result of abuse and neglect.
Okay, so let me answer your question. There's a lot of material here in your questions. So I'm going to try to break it down a few ways. First of all, you're talking about some really, really important concepts like the repetition principle, where the mother probably had similar wounds, and now she's acting them out on the child by setting the child up to be abused by another person, namely the boyfriend. Correct? So that's one issue. The other issue is that she is scapegoating this child because she is identifying the child as a part of the guy that impregnated her, that she wants the baby of anyway, and is now ruining her life. So imagine, let's magnify the situation. So now she's carrying and projecting a ton of hate on this child. Can you see that part of it?
Yeah.
Okay, so now along comes the boyfriend, who's really not that bonded to the child. And if he's with her, he probably is not a very healthy person either, right? And so what does he want more than anything? He just wants to have fun with this woman and doesn't really want the child in the way. And he's got probably his own issues. Maybe he was beaten, I don't know, abused, beaten, whatever category his wounds fall into. And now what he gets to do is he gets to do the WTF, the what the Freud also. So he gets to be the committer. And in this frame, he gets to be a kind of like he gets to have a sick, a part of being of service to the woman. I'll get your kid in order. I will set the boundaries. I am the house. Okay, so the poor little kid, if he's got education, psychoeducation, which is why I'm dying to get the mind map into the school systems. I really, really am. Yeah. But it's a touchy one, because at the end you say, what's the kid to do? So I'll circle back to that, okay? So now the child maybe is aware because somebody explained to them this is inappropriate. Let's say they have a teacher or a family member or someone that says to them, this is crazy that your mommy's boyfriend beats you. This is sick. You're not sick. You've been made sick. And those are really powerful words. And those are the words of an enlightened witness, except that what's the little kid gonna do? Okay, so usually what they do is they whitewash the mommy because they have a toxic tie to the mommy. After all, it is their mommy. So they don't want to hurt the mommy. Right. But they're also in conflict because their brain knows that something's rotten in the state of Denmark. There's something sick here, but they don't want to lose the love. And so what they'll do,
So are they ambivalent then?
they'll start turning the anger inward. They'll fluctuate. And I just saw this the other day. A child changed his story, overnight, complained about this very matter, And then once in the hands of the mother, whoops, 180-degree turn. I feel sick. I love my mommy. My mommy's great. That was really nothing. No, it wasn't a big deal. That was a kid. It wasn't that bad. Maybe,
Yeah.
I was a bad boy. I deserved it. Mommy says it's all my fault. Okay, so they'll vacillate. And the more they're with the enlightened witness, the more their mind will be clear. But it's really, really sad for the poor kid, because what are they going to do with this information, right? But I want to go on
Exactly.
with a little bit about Alice Miller, and please stay on the line, because it's such an interesting article here. So she's studying the roots of good and evil, okay? And she says probably not in the genes, but often the earliest days of life, which is exactly what the mind map and this whole philosophy is so aligned with her, which is why I derive such pleasure in reading her work. She taught me a lot. It's inconceivable to me that a child who comes into the world among attentive, loving, and protective parents could become a predatory monster. Not likely, but it can happen. It could happen. Maybe there's something that we don't know. Maybe there's a brain tumor. Maybe there has been an unnoticed abuse that was repressed and now coming out in symptoms. Because, as I say in panel 5 of my book, symptoms are the hieroglyphics, or the clues and the cues that point to the cause. Okay? So now she's talking about, not very likely that if you have this beautiful blueprint, will you become this murder dictator. And she says, on the attainment of adulthood impels people to act out their merciless revenge on society, or I'll add other people. Okay? So talking about the macro picture, which I also refer to, but now I'm also boiling it down to the micro problem. These vengeful acts are always garbed in hypocritical ideologies, purporting that the dictator's exclusive and overriding wish is the happiness of his people. And I'll boil it down to the micro. Oh, it's all for your good. It's all for your good. You need to follow whatever mom or dad or boyfriend says. This is all for your good. So it's the gaslighting. Can you hear the gaslighting? This is for your own good.
Absolutely.
Okay, this is all for your own. So this is extremely. She now goes into the logic. It's logical that a beaten child would quickly pick up the language of violence. Doesn't that make sense? So another thing that will occur here is that little child that you gave the example of may resort to violence, because that's the languaging. That's what they know. I encounter fierce resistance. I too was a battered child. Okay, here she gives a history of examples of Hitler and Stalin. Okay, monsters. When I try to expose the social consequences of child abuse, I encountered fierce resistance. And so do I, by the way. So do I, because this act of omission is just not talked about enough. Repeatedly, I was told I too was a battered child, but that didn't make me a criminal. So that's the excuse. Well, I was a battered child, so look at me. I'm a good person. So what are you talking about? And this is the best part of the article. Let me see if I can decipher it for you guys. So when asked for the details about childhood, I was always told of a person who loved them, but was unable to protect them. She refers to Dostoevsky, the famous author, who had a brutal father and a loving mother, but she wasn't strong enough to protect him, but gave him a powerful conception of love. Do you hear that? Even though she couldn't do much, she still blueprinted a powerful conception of love. Many have also been lucky enough to find enlightened and courageous witnesses, people who help them to recognize the injustices they suffer, to give vent to their feelings of rage, pain, and indignation at what happened to them. These people never become criminals. Do you see the difference here?
Yeah.
When there is an
Totally.
there is a healing pathway, which is actually panel number 6 right here. Okay, put it up on the board because I know my map is up there. Panel number 6 is really where the rubber meets the road. So instead of imploding and having symptoms like cutting themselves or dying of an overdose or out and out suiciding or exploding and identifying with the aggressor and exploding all their rage on everyone, they get to unload, they get to be heard, they get to be understood, they get to source the pain, they get to have someone who can empathically identify with why they are the way they are. Okay, so this is so up the alley of the mind map. I'm so glad I found this article.
Yeah,
So
that would make a huge difference just to have
right,
that.
right, just that. So she says
Yeah.
they never become criminals. Parents who abuse their children tend to mistreat and neglect them, resembles their past. So she says, what's going on here? I want to find the juicy part, okay? To consciousness. In other words, they're suppressed because there's nobody to call the crazy. There's nobody to call the gaslighting. They often compel the person to violent acts that reproduce the abuse. The aim is to avoid the fear of powerlessness, okay? And then she goes on to say that um, uh, okay, there was something about the truth. The truth is that I really want to find this part. Okay, so here's the persecutor. Okay, a thesis that I
Yeah.
find totally false. So here's the statement. Here is the false statement. Every victim that is hurt is going to become a persecutor. False, false. Okay.
Correct.
However, yet
Yeah.
everyone that had a enlightened witness, they didn't go down the drain. That's the point. That's the differential.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no longer that excuse of witness. Okay, and one other thing, and then is this explaining a lot for you? Just ask away because I'm getting kind of really engaged in this article. I think it's such a great article. So ask away.
No,
And
I think what you're talking about, the enlightened witness, having just even one person to be able to tell what's going on and have them validate that
yeah,
you are not crazy, that it, even if they can't help you, that they validate that you are correct and that you feel that it's wrong and that what you sense and what you think is happening is actually happening. I can see how that would make all the difference in the world, even if they couldn't do anything. Just
the point even further. A Japanese crew shot a film of therapeutic work in prison in Arizona. And this is what happened. The inmates worked in groups, talked a lot about their childhood, and some of them said, I've been all over the place and killed innocent people to avoid the feelings I have today. But I know that I can bear these feelings in the group where I feel safe. I no longer need to run around and kill. I'm at home here. I recognize what happened. The past recedes and my anger along with it. Got that? Okay, so
yeah, so the independent witness doesn't have to be, it can come at any point in your life to turn it around. Is that what you're saying?
well, hopefully, because if it didn't, then I might as well throw my mind map in the garbage can. Okay, all right. So not ready. To,
Don't
not
do that.
ready.
Don't do that. No, no, no.
No, I won't. I'm not ready to do that. Okay, not ready to do that. But my point is that this is a pathway to healing, and in this case, the pathway of this particular person's healing was a group that acknowledged the pain and the suffering and acknowledge that the symptoms were as a result of the cause. In the Be the Cause mind map therapy, what we're doing is we're literally allowing space for that person to exorcise emotionally their emotional poisons and be witness to the abuses and neglects that occurred to childhood, so that they can understand that they are not crazy, that they have been made crazy, they were not born this way, and they have a pathway now for self-expression and healing, and that they can be the cause, as I say in my book, of a better outcome for part two of their life, which is the other side of my motivation, is to get this into the prison system. Imagine if they can work through their issues before they're released, or even just work through their issues so they're not sitting in blame and shame. They have enough to pay the consequences of their action legally. So this is kind of, to me, a get out of jail card, if you will.
Yeah, I can see how it would lower recidivism rates. It's just unfortunate that you're having a hard time getting this into schools, because if you could get it into schools, you could potentially avert the people ending up in prison or ending up abusing, continuing the abuse cycle. And you could also help help so many kids that are trapped, give them an opportunity to talk about it,
Okay,
to be heard, and also maybe to get some help.
Right. So here's the sad part, that I oftentimes have parents who want to send their children to therapy, and we can clean them up at the Psychological Healing Center. But the best service that I can provide is to help the family clean up their multi-generational act in by having acts of omission and so forth, because the child is in a horrible predicament. So you take a bright child, and there they are, and the mother's saying, "Little Johnny, it's all your fault. Shame on you. If you don't shut up and stop talking to people about mommy, this is shame on you. I'm your mommy, and I want the best for you. And mommy's boyfriend is a really, really smart guy, and he's mommy's boyfriend, and you better respect him." And then the brain is about to burst, doesn't know what to do with this, because they're trapped. Right. So you see, this is the sad part, but somewhere in the recesses of that child's mind, they can go back, maybe at some point, to say, that was a crazy situation. That was a crazy situation. And of course, the younger the child is, the harder it is for the child, because the bond is so necessary. They can't feed themselves. They can't necessarily clothe themselves at age, 2, 3, whatever. Okay. And so what are they to do? So they must survive their hostage childhood, that I refer to drug, sex, rock and roll, which is filling that hole in the soul and then breaking down into, at the extreme end, homicide, suicide; at the not so extreme end, just general breaking down. And these breakdowns can range in severity from a divorce, financial losses, losses of significant friendships, and so on, and anything that really proves itself to be unsustainable. So are you getting the picture of what happens when a person is gaslit and lied to and not protected and not told the truth? You see the picture here?
Yes.
Yes,
I definitely am. It's crazy making.
Very crazy.
And what you mentioned about sending the kid home to the family, it's kind of like, it's an addiction. The abuse is an addiction. It's a release for the abusers. They abuse and they get whatever chemical process that happens in their body. There must be some sort of chemical cascade. And so just like an addict that goes away to rehab and gets better, they can't return to the sick environment where all the people that they were doing drugs with.
They cannot, but they
live,
must.
Right? Because
they
must. The kid has to. Unlike the adult addict that could go start a new life, the child does have to return in most cases, I'm guessing, to this family unit. And therefore, you're right, you have to get to the family. Otherwise, well, at least the kid's better set up to survive, I guess.
So what's very sad is that the parents or the boyfriend or the parent or the step parent or whoever's in the picture of the child, the executors of the child's life here, have their own childhood wounds. And if they don't go back to their process and heal their process, then they're going to be omitters and committers and replicate this system, just like what you were saying in your example, that the guy's going to act out on the little kid and the mother's going to act out on the little kid, and he's going to be scapegoated. So just want to leave a little bit more time for other people to call in.
Sure, yeah.
Were your questions answered?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yes, thank you. It was a great topic.
Thank you. And thank you for calling in. And so,
sure.
This is such a passionate topic. And Dawn, if you're listening, you suggested the show. If you want to call in, please feel free to do so. Keep it obviously to the topic, and anyone that calls in, please keep it topic specific. Appreciate it. And any comments that you make on the YouTube channel, please do not spam up the comments. I see so many advertisements there. I don't know what they're advertising. I have no idea, but I don't know how to get rid of those ads. Just please don't, out of respect for everyone else, okay? So here is her interpretation of Hitler. Okay, so I don't know if you know that Hitler's father was half Jewish. So what Hitler did, Adolf, Germany, was convinced himself that only the death of every single Jew could shield him from fearful and daily memory of his brutal father. So what he did was he projected on the Jewish people his rage around his father. And only through literally exterminating the Jewish people, could he even have some kind of an idea that he could be free from his pain and suffering. So the whole Jewish race had to be exterminated. So she says, this is Alice Miller's interpretation. I know how easy it is to dismiss this interpretation of the Holocaust, but she says, honestly, I haven't yet found a better one. Besides, the case of Hitler shows that hatred and fear cannot be resolved through power, even absolute power, as long as the hatred is transferred to scapegoats. I think we have a call in. Hello.
Hi, Dr. Judy, it's Dawn.
Oh, yay. Thank you for this talk. You got me going, okay? And then you had
I understand. It's a very passionate topic because, with everything going on with narcissists that I'm dealing with, what really hurts the most are the people that are what I call fence sitters, or the ones that don't want to take sides. And it's not really a side thing, but it's the Enlightened Witness kind of thing where people validate what you're going through and support you. But because I don't have the physical bruises, people kind of blow you off that you're not really experiencing what you're experiencing, especially with a passive-aggressive, covert narcissist.
Precisely. And they're very good at convincing you that there's something wrong with you. And so they tap right into the self-blame and the shame and the negative core beliefs. I'm not good enough. I don't matter. I'm not lovable. I'm not important, and on and on and on. And that's back to exactly what Alice Miller talks about, which is that it's all my fault. And I hear this from little children. It breaks my heart. It's all my fault. My mommy told me that it's all my fault because of me. Now this mess is occurring. It's all my fault. If only I was
a boy or good girl. I think as little ones, we look to parents as gods. I mean, truly, when you start bursting that bubble that they're just humans, and then when you realize that they possibly are even monsters, you say to yourself, what happened? Your whole paradigm of life just completely shifts.
Completely shifts. And as you can see by this article, her point is that no amount of power, as long as the hatred is transferred to scapegoats, nothing helps. So Hitler tried everything. Let's just put everybody in the gas chamber, shoot them down, drown them, experiment on them, stamp them out. If the true cause of the hatred is identified, she says, is experienced with the feelings that accompany this recognition, blind hatred of innocent victims can be dispelled. Sex criminals stop their depredations if they manage to overcome their amnesia, which is the suppression, and more their tragic fate. Thanks to the empathy of an enlightened witness, old wounds can be healed if exposed to the light. That's exactly what the mind map is saying. Old wounds can be healed when they are exposed to the light of the truth. But then again, if the child knows the truth and goes back into the family, they cannot speak the truth. So they have to zip it. And also, very often, change the storyline. Change the storyline. Yep. Why? That's what we call toxic bonding. Bonded to the toxic person that's now gaslighting them into thinking that this is normal, that this is okay. Mommy's a wonderful person. The boyfriend beating them is a wonderful guy. Why is he wonderful? Well, because you know, it's all your fault. You needed to be disciplined. Come on, be real about this. And yes, mommy, you're right. I'm a bad boy. That doesn't mean that the child isn't acting out and being out of control. But geez, there's another way to do this, don't you think? Because study after study shows that if you employ aggressive methods, then they blueprint aggression, and then they will act out on their sister or their brother, or they'll rip up the toys, or they'll child up to go crazy. Then the child goes crazy, acts out, and then the parents punish them for the very thing they caused. This is a real mess over. That's it. Well, mess over.
And so even the outward acts of aggression that you see with kids, but also the learned helplessness and the acts of, or the anger that's turned inward. I mean, anxiety and depression are on the rise. So clearly there's something wrong. And, you know, my knowledge is about attachment in infancy and the importance of a healthy attachment bond. And that bond actually is the template for all relationships as one goes through the lifespan.
And
so it starts in infancy.
Are you in the helping profession? Remind me a little
bit. Yes. I am a pediatric physical therapist, yes.
I think that's so beautiful. And I know we've had conversations. Maybe we can pick them up, because certainly I need people who are also thinking this way. And certainly I'm not good at red tape, getting these kinds of things into the school system and the hospitals and so on. It's just that when people are going to be more aware and open their eyes and see that we cannot do without school systems who don't teach this, not only to the children, but to the parents. That's really, really important, because I'll repeat, you can't keep clean.
Though I question the people that need this are the ones that don't want to listen to it.
Nope.
So I think what we need to do is go towards the parents, the teachers, whomever that are willing to listen, that need this but don't want to listen, because there's no getting through. Denial is a very strong emotion, and there's no getting through that.
You know, and one of the reasons people deny is because of my parents, I feel like I don't matter. Because of my parents, I act out. Because of my parents, I have low self-esteem. And as I say to my patients, this is not a blame and shame and let's destroy the parents model. It's a model of self and release the poison, and also understand that their parents were injured at the causal level, and their grandparents and great-grandparents and so on and so forth were also injured like this. And somebody's got to stop the madness of the multi-generational transmission process, which Dr. Murray talks a lot about. And also I want everyone to know that I break this all down visually so, and I refer to all the theoreticians, the psychologists that contributed to the thoughts in this mind map process. And that video is available. The Be the Cause Mind Map video series. It's a download. Don't wait for anything to come in the mail. And you can check that out, and you can order it off of the website, psychologicalhealingcenter.com. And that's something that you can sit and learn and read the book, and you can also share with your family members. And psychoeducation has to be a part of good therapy. Therapy just can't be about, how does that make you feel? And how does this make you feel? And oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. If you're not learning, you're going to be a perpetual patient.
Yep. You have to take an active role in the healing process.
You got to do that. That's correct. And yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to just mention one more thing, because I just also see that it's not even always the blatant, obvious abuse that takes place in families, but the hidden with the emotional neglect and the gaslighting, where you have children whose physical needs have always been met. They were even sent to good schools. Yes. But then yet those people, they grow up and they realize that there's something missing. And it was because they experienced emotional neglect. They had, the quote unquote good parents, but what was the definition of those good parents? Because the father worked all the time and provided with the money, with a house and food, and the mom brought her to Girl Scouts or sports, but there was no emotional involvement. There was no mirroring going on. There was no emotional validation. So that can actually, that can also create a lot of the hole in the soul, as you say.
And also, you wrote me another email right after I said, please call in, listen, I'm doing it. And you said you mentioned some quotes, and I think you wrote some material to me. Could you share that with the audience?
Yeah.
I'll pull it up. Please do.
So I find a lot of great scenes that kind of help me get through things that I'm experiencing. So like Wonder Woman clearly is a really great movie to help bolster, when I feel down. But Star Wars, there was a great quote, and it was, they win when they want you to feel that you're alone. So meaning the First Order, who was Darth Vader and the Sith and all that, they win when you think that you're alone and you can't fight the battle. So for all the victims of narcissist abuse, we're so isolated, and that whole thing with everybody just disperses and you're left on your own, maybe having to carry children, and take care of them with everything going on, and then maintaining bills and finances and stuff. So I think get into these community support groups and they realize that they're not alone. There is power and strength in numbers, and it really helps you.
Right on. It was something like Upstep or something, or
Upstanders. Okay, so I had gone on
Upstanders. Go ahead.
Upstanders. I had went on a field trip with a Happen, because there was only one country, I believe, the Dominican Republic, that would take the Jewish families into their country, and everybody else turned them away because nobody wanted to get involved. Everybody wanted to sit on the fence. And that's why that was Omission, which is the topic of your show, versus upstanders who have a moral compass and say, this is not okay.
That's right. And that's why the quote by Elie Wiesel, Holocaust survivor, action is the only remedy. And there have been other examples of upstanders in life, people who have stood up for other people who on a macro level stand up for injustices and so on. And this is something that we all have to understand how important it is to stand up. I prefer the nonviolent way. I'm a proponent of healing global disconnect, and I'll get into that later. I do have a website where I state my philosophy. The website is called healingglobalDisconnect.com. It's not a very well developed site, but the essence of what I'm saying is that we have a big challenge, which is to come together, how to live the mind map, okay? Because we're trying to figure out how to do and what to do and who to listen to and who not to listen to. Is a really, really, really very, very confusing. And one of the things that I think this whole topic includes is that we have to consider principles over people. Principles over people. I think I did a show on that. And the essence of that is that you have to put your principles first. So even though that person may be your mother, your father, your lover, or your teacher, or anyone, if they're not in line with ethical and empathic and good strong principles, then you've got to understand that you can't necessarily support someone who is gaslighting or scapegoating or projecting. Even though you might love that person, the best thing that we could do in as nice a way as possible, if possible, is to call them out. And that's what I love about the peaceful healing dialogue, is it's a way to really confront people and have a truth conversation without blowing the bridge, and hopefully making some repairs. And I know that we're all human. I'm certainly very human. I tend to blow up. I tend to get very defensive when someone, particularly in my family, is hurting or being hurt. I'm just like a real mother bear when that happens. So I usually don't, in the heat of the moment, pull out my own peaceful healing dialogue, but I try to go back into it and say, hey, now that I've calmed down, and now that we've calmed down, let's talk about some form of self-reflection and self-correction, and what can we do to go inward and learn more about ourselves and create a healthy environment. So I hope I've answered a lot of questions tonight. I know I only have a handful of minutes. Is there anything else, Dawn, that you wanted to say?
No, maybe just, for people listening to just really be that enlightened witness, whether it's for an adult or a child, and to, just really, I guess, just really validate somebody's experience, because that's really all we're looking for, is to be heard, and that, our opinions matter.
Absolutely. That's really, really significant. Thank you so much for suggesting the topic. Free to suggest topics, and definitely do download my Mind Map video series. And please know that we have a very powerful pathway to healing, which is called the Mind Map video series, Journey to Healing from Narcissistic Abuse, hosted by my life coach, Yitz Epstein. And it is a very in-depth way to address the gaslighting and the acts of omission and the sneaky little ways that we are driven crazy, and to call this to the forefront so that we can finally get all the psychological. It's really a way to heal through the apathy, the lack of empathy that didn't occur in the first few years of life, or all the years of life. So thank you very much. I'm going to segue to my song, Shrink That Tune. I know I've been forgetting it lately, but I just will do that. And again, thank you so much, Dawn and Laura, for calling in. Okay, so this song is called I Don't Care About You, by I Don't Care About You. And that's really the message you're sending your children when you don't have their back. I don't care about you. Okay, I don't know what was wrong. I had such misery. Now I know what was wrong. You were wrong for me. I don't care about you. Well, this person that they've woken up. So the song isn't saying it's all my fault. The song is saying, I figured it out. You stood in my way. You were my sun and moon. Now I see the whole world. That was out beyond. I don't care about you. I don't care about you. So one of the healthy ways of growing into your life that are not fit to nourish you and nurture you and mirror you. Now I'm taking the cure. It will hurt for a while, but I'm learning to smile the way I used to do. I don't care about you. I don't care about you. So thank you very, very much, everyone, for tuning in. And remember, website, psychologicalhealingcenter.com. And definitely grab a free copy of the PDF, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect. See you next week, everyone. Good night.